The 400 subscribers special. I promised it, and I am delivering right now. So, recently I said in a video that if I got 400 subscribers, and I was about 398 then, now I'm at 405, I would do a reveal. And the reveal would be, why is this channel named Honest Tree? So let's just quickly get it out of the way. The reason the channel is named that is because that is the meaning of my middle name. And my middle name is not English. So, Honest Tree. My parents wanted me to be an upright, honest person, and that name means Honest Tree. So, trying to think of something. It's not really a great name for a channel, but that's what I picked. So there it is. Here we are on the ride, November 15th, 2022. It's starting to get cold up here in Texas, or should I say down here in Texas in the Dallas area. And the temperature for this ride was, I think, maybe 40, 39 at the start, Fahrenheit. Which normally wouldn't be a big deal, except this has been kind of a weird year where it's taken a long time for us to experience any cold weather. So last week we were, in just regular clothing, sweating, hot, humid. This is really the first cold nighttime ride of this fall/winter. And as such, the numbers were quite poor in terms of turnout. And this was an interesting ride. This was a weird ride. Sorry about the lack of overlays here. The overlay software is suddenly not working because I think Xert has changed their output format, and thus I have to change my import format, and I'm just not going to mess with it right now. So no overlays here. I could use a different software, but I don't feel like it. When I get to 1,000 subscribers, I will feel like using a second software if the first software doesn't work. I promise you. But anyway, on this ride, November 15th, we had riders from different groups. So typically with the pop ride, there is a pop A, a pop B, or a pop C, or sometimes just a pop A and a pop C, and sometimes you have a D somewhere in there in the summer. It's all very confusing. But anyway, everyone who showed up, just small numbers, we decided that we'd all ride together. So different levels, different abilities here on the ride. Although, even Pop C is pretty fast and pretty fit. So there isn't a humongous difference in rider ability, but there is some. Your Pop A is more of like your kind of like Cat 3, Cat 4, and your occasional sandbagging Cat 2. Or even your occasional sandbagging Masters World Champion. Foreshadowing. Yes, we'll talk about that in a minute. So like I said, this was a weird ride. First thing, I roll into the parking lot, and I don't have footage of this. I should have taken a picture. I roll up next to a few guys, and suddenly I see this guy who's dressed in a Han Solo Hoth parka on his bike. I don't know if you remember this, because, I'm showing my age here. Han Solo was wearing this blue kind of, big parka with the fur-lined hoodie. If you remember that, I had that action figure when I was a kid. He looked exactly like that, and he wasn't riding his regular bike. He was riding a monstrosity of an e-bike. I'm talking, like fat tire bikes, and this bike must weigh over 100 pounds. And I guess he's got it all souped up. It's one of those that can go 28 miles per hour. He says that he hacked it, but it's not able to go above 28 miles per hour even after hacking. And it's also one of those that has a throttle on it, so you don't have to pedal. So he was on the ride. Although I don't believe I have footage of him because I didn't start the camera while he was still on the ride. He didn't intend to do the whole ride. But, I wonder, if you can do 28, you can keep up, but you will get gapped in certain parts where we're going over 28. But, if you can go 28 up the hills, yeah, we're not going to be doing 28 up the hills. Anyway, so that was the first weird thing. The second weird thing that happened was I was on Collins, so the regular riders of this who may be watching, they'll know where Collins Road is, but Collins Road and Richardson, and we're slowing down in front of the road called Plano Road. Slowing, and suddenly this bird flies up, from my right side, just flies in the corner of my eye. It looked like a big bird, and it flew into my back wheel, struck my back wheel, and like bounced off or did something. And of course, by then I'd rolled past and I didn't see exactly what the case was. Well, the guys behind me did see it, and it was like an owl. An owl had, I guess it was on the ground, flew up and hit my back wheel. So that's a first. First time I've been struck by, my bike has been struck by an owl. I think I've had an owl swoop on me on Holford before, or something to that effect, but never had an owl strike my bike. So it's going to be a weird night when you get an owl strike. Apparently the bird looked injured. It may have been injured before it struck my bike. It's awfully weird that it would be in a trafficked area right there on the ground, and it may have been a baby owl, I don't know. But they said that it looked a little injured, but it flew away. So thank goodness it was not dead. Now the other thing about this ride is that not only did we have one e-bike, we had two e-bikes on this ride. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Relatively small numbers here on the ride, of course. I did mention that we have a Masters World Champion on this ride, and actually you can see him on the left here. He is right in front of the Cambodian Batman. Cambodian Batman's in the fluorescent stockings. What is that? Yeah, I do believe that's he's wearing the same kit as a couple of other guys on the ride, but I do believe. So if you see the bike that's black with World Champion colored stripes on the front fork, that is him. Yeah, as we're moving up, yes, that is him on the left. So that is Mr. Carlson, Chris Carlson, and I'm saying his name because I think I can also promote his business as a coach. He probably doesn't mind that. He is a cycling coach and is one of the most premier elite cycling coaches in this part of the country or state or Dallas. Certainly many local guys that are very dedicated and are very fast have used his coaching to great success from what I've been able to observe. And I do believe he won 1 or 2 races at Masters World Championship track this year. And of course he has won countless, well, I'm sure they're countable. I mean, it's not infinity, but he has won a lot of previous national and world championships. I believe on track, but maybe in other disciplines as well. Road, perhaps. I'm not sure. And back in his younger days, he was also a professional cyclist. So I think about cycling. How often does a guy just like stay so connected and so active in cycling just year after year after year after year, like into their more senior years? I don't know that it happens all that often. I think he's kind of unique in that respect. I know it does happen, but just not that often. And I think one thing that's a little bit different about our scene here in Dallas is that we don't have a ton of pros or ex-pros. We have some, but I think like, for example, if you live in Austin, there's a lot more. Or, if you live in parts of California, there's a lot more. I don't know why. But such is the case. It's always fun to have a rider of great talent and achievement that's a little bit, it's a little bit out of place. Like I said, this is kind of, Pape is kind of like a Cat 3, Cat 4 type level group ride. So what's the other thing that happened on this ride? So we had, you'll see this a little bit later. So we had a paracyclist on our ride. He normally does the Pop B, and we'll see him as well. He is Okay, this is where like I got on the front, but then Chris just goes boom, and I was not doing a trivial amount of watts here. It was not like I was going easy, and these guys just gone right off the front here. Um, but yeah, Larry he will see him in a bit, and he really hammered hard on Renner, which is the last main drag, which is like 5 miles long or so. Gosh, they're so far ahead, Kimmeth and Chris, that I barely see him on the video here. This is on Pape, normally kind of like a go zone, although they've gone a little bit early than normal, towards the railroad track, right before 544. And, I thought for this ride, because it was so cold, I think the temperatures were dipping down into about 37, 36 degrees, that it might make sense for us to go a little slower than normal, especially with a mixed ability, mixed fitness kind of makeup of the riders. But, it's okay to go fast in the go zone. We will likely reconnect and regroup here at the light, which is almost always red. And then we'll have a little bit of a go after that. And that's exactly what happened. Oh, here we have Larry. Larry's forming a plan in his mind at this point, which is I am going to try to crush everyone's legs on this relatively, controlled ride that hasn't gone as fast as normal. Larry's like, it's time to blow. It's time to blow this up. It's time to get it turned up. And so there was a debate between a couple of riders later on in the ride about whether this was really a good idea or not. So what I thought would make sense to answer the question about whether someone on a group ride who has an e-bike should hammer on the front, should they do that, is to ask yourself the question, if I was on an e-bike on this particular ride, should I go to the front and hammer? A couple ways to think about this. So you could say, well, it's kind of like pacing the group. I can go faster in parts than people that don't have an e-bike, generally speaking, because there are some hills, for example. It's hard to go 28 miles per hour up hills. It's hard to maintain, say, 250 watts plus your own, say, 250 watts, 500 watts. Not too many of us can maintain 450, 500 watts for all that long, but perhaps he can on his e-bike. So if he's breaking the wind, if he's on the front, he's pacing us kind of like a motorcycle, is that good? I think it depends. Depends on how you're feeling and your perspective and what you want out of the ride. On the other hand, if you blow up the ride, which, you do have the right, generally speaking, on a normal Pape ride to blow up the ride. I mean, when I say blow up the ride, I mean ride off the front. Not ride dangerously, but ride off the front, go as hard as you want. Is that good? So perhaps the argument against blowing up the ride, is it's nighttime, it's a small group, it's really cold, we have different levels and abilities here, and there could be somebody on the back who might not be happy about getting dropped on these busy nighttime roads in the dark, in the cold. And that'd be the counter argument, right? So, let's try to stay together, let's not blow things up. So, I think that's the kind of debate that will occur over time as e-bikes become more and more popular. What's the role of the e-bike on the group ride? Now, one question, of course, that will come up is that e-bike rider safe in terms of their bike handling and their knowledge of how to use that power? I don't think anyone has concerns about Larry in that regard, but you could imagine some bike riders would be outside their depth in terms of a kind of dynamic amoeba, kind of like a crit amoeba that takes place, and can they use that power wisely and safely? So, but I think this is going to be a common sort of thing. People get older, people start to lose their fitness, or they have health problems, and they may want to have an e-bike and keep riding socially with the guys they ride with. So I don't want to belabor the point too much. I've talked about e-bikes before, for example, in my trips to Arizona, where you have a big retired community there in the Prescott area, and a lot of those guys are on e-bikes. So they're 60 years old, 70 years old, 80 years old, and it's a relatively small road biking community, and of course a lot of difference in levels there, from very slow to very fit. And you have a lot of climbing and mountains in that area, so that blows up groups even if they are pretty close together in fitness. But you compound the differences in fitness, and then e-bikes can become critical to just being able to stay with your friends on a group ride. Now we can get into this Prescott thing. Seems to me like they're pretty okay with blowing each other up. Their idea of riding together in a group seems to be we will regroup every few miles while everyone is strung out on highways. Again, story for another day. But yeah. So that was the ride tonight. Normally when it's cold, we'll still get a big group, but I think it's just the sudden change, the cold front. People just aren't in the mode of wanting to go out into the cold. Typically speaking, on the pop ride, if it's below freezing, you're not going to get anyone on the ride. People call it at that point. But if it's like 34, 35, 36, you'll normally still get a group that goes out. So we did have a group that went out despite the relatively low temperatures, but yeah, and once you get the hang of it, it's fine. One video that I do plan to make that I thought I'd make a long time ago, it's like one of those videos that would get a lot of views and be useful but isn't particularly fun to do, is to talk about winter clothing strategy. So like just quickly outlining how I do winter clothing. If you experienced people, that's going to be dumb and not useful, but for people that are inexperienced, I think it could be useful. I saw on our local message boards here in the Dallas area several people asking, like, what do I buy for winter gear? How do I kit up? So I have my own system that's worked out for me, and I think I'll share that in a future video. It's not going to be highly produced. This is a 400 subscriber channel, not a 4,000 or 40,000 subscriber channel. This is the intimate kind of channel that you go to. This is like that indie band in your small town that like only you and a few friends know about. That's how I kind of think of this. And like, if it ever got big, you'd be a little disappointed. But if it did get big, you would say I was, an OG. I was there at the beginning, and you'd be like kind of annoyed by the people that otherwise liked it. That's this kind of channel. This is like a simple home-cooked meal, this channel. You come here for sustenance and goodness. Anyway, you also, I wish I was just more funny, I wish you were coming for the comedy. And I really gotta work on my routine. I aspire to be funny. On purpose. Anyway, I'm just gonna call it quits here on the talking part. So I will talk to you guys later, and I may like explain how to wrap my handlebars if I get 500 subscribers or something like that. Bye.
Well, I did. You know how I crashed? I've been doing it. Good right now? Some hot cocoa.
Yeah.
Yummy. With some marshmallows.
To level up. I'm gonna have to level up if I'm gonna swear on Chris. Okay, man. What did you do? Did you Wheaties today, man?
Oh, no. I don't know. It's not a to me to hold and make very
So I'm
fucking
doing
awkward.
this.
Well, because he's like hammering on the front on an e-bike.